Hey, welcome to Jamf and Intune, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's Jamf's forward-looking statement. Please read this. All right, my name is Todd Ness, and I work for Jamf, work for Veritas, and I work on the Macs at my company, and I've been supporting Macs since 2007. Today we're here to talk about how Intune and Jamf integrate, and Bryce Carlson, who works for Jamf and is one of the people that works in depth on the Jamf Microsoft integration, is here to support me a little.
Yep, thanks, Todd. I'm Bryce Carlson, as Todd said. I'm a product specialist at Jamf. I work with the product team within Jamf, the product team at Microsoft for the Intune and integrations, and a lot of the support areas then, and that's how I got to know Todd, and I'm here to support him today with a little bit of backup information.
Thank you, Bryce. So, late last year, Microsoft made some changes to how the Intune console was working, and deleting devices from the Intune console didn't work so good, and they'd come back and they'd disappear. And so I tried to put in some tickets and had problems, but once we got all that figured out, I thought, man, this would be kind of a good thing to talk about at JNUC. So I came up with this topic, and I decided to name it The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that classic title theme song started playing in my head as soon as I thought of the title, and I hope you all have seen the movie and or know who Clint Eastwood is. So, what's good about Jamf and the Intune integration? First off, there's more security available for your environment. Second, there's less password entry once you get the SSO stuff all set up. And last, that there's a lot of good resources available. So we'll start with the resources so that we can all be on the same terminology, have the same terminology background. I'm not going to go into in-depth on any of these, but we're just going to do a quick high-level overview. First on this list is conditional access, and that means giving access to applications and or data based off of a specific set of conditions. And in my company, we use Azure, Intune, and Jamf to provide the conditional access. Next, you've got trusted device. That's a device that Azure and Intune knows about and has a good compliance state. Zero trust networking is one of those buzzwords out there right now, but it basically boils down to allowing access to services and or data based off the status of a device as opposed to what network it's connecting from. There are some tokens involved. They're kind of the magic that helps all the SSO stuff work in the background. So when you sign in, there's an authentication token that gets created, and it gains access to your Microsoft Organization Act certificate. And that certificate works with Intune and Azure to identify your computer, and then based off the inventory records from Jamf, helps the conditional access rules to decide whether you get access or are denied. Different applications get their own tokens, and depending on how things are defined, the tokens can expire in 1 hour, 24 hours, or in some cases up to 12 days might be the default setting. It all depends on what your security team wants to set up for the life of a token and how long they want to let them refresh themselves. Kerberos, Realms, and TGTs all work together. It's all part of Kerberos. And that's the back end of how single sign-on works. In an Active Directory uses Kerberos authentication. And there are many great talks out there about Kerberos if you want to know more. The realm equates to your Active Directory domain. The ticket granting ticket, or TGT, helps you get authenticated to services. And if you're on your internal network and you have TGTs, you typically get to type less than you do when you have single sign-on on the external network. There are some certificates that are part of the Jamf and Intune enrollment. Your Mac gets assigned a Microsoft Organization Access certificate, and that certificate helps identify your computer to Intune and Azure. That, combined with the Kerberos identity, enables authentication and keeps your tokens alive and active and gives you access to the applications and data. Some of the other terms we have are registration and enrollment. Those can be synonymous, and if you just need to be aware that there's enrolling in Jamf and the registration with Intune. And after you enroll into Jamf, there's this nice little tool called Jamf AAD, and it does the workplace join, and it gets the data over to Azure so that your system can be told whether it's compliant or not. And last but not least, there's an application that is required for all of this called the company portal, and it actually is part of the registration process into Intune as well, and it lets users check the status of their computer so that if it has a not compliant state, they can look there as to what might need to be fixed. So under the resources, we have Bryce Carlson's website called macbuddy.info, and he's going to give us a quick overview.
Yeah, and what MacBuddy is it's basically everything that we don't have time for today. I started putting stuff together on there because I got sick of retyping it in emails over and over whenever I have to explain it, or whenever I have to give training internally. And so what we've got there is the process of registration, of the inventory update, and the data sent to Azure, all broken down piece by piece with those pieces of the logging. So you can see, okay, here's Jamf AD where it triggered the workplace drawing with company portal, and then where it cascaded after that. So a lot of good information there. We definitely don't have time for all that today, but by all means, check that out along with our documentation Todd's going to talk about.
All right, thanks, Bryce. So Jamf created some documentation to help you get your integration set up, and it works really good if you follow it step by step and pay attention. The great news, too, is that you rarely ever have to look at it after you get it set up. The one big key is to make sure you have a global admin handy to approve the API access during the setup. Microsoft has the same setup documentation, plus they have some debugging, troubleshooting documentation that, if you follow all of their steps, gets into the more extreme cases. And then one of the best resources for any Mac admin, in my opinion, is the Slack Mac admins team. In there, there's a channel called Jamf Intune Integration, and the best part about that is Bryce hangs out there a lot, and he and the rest of the people in the community can help give some pointers onto what might be going on because we all share the same pain points. So another good thing, more security. That's a big benefit. If you get this all set up right and you turn everything on, you can make your environment much more secure. You can make sure that devices accessing your data are patched and thereby reducing vulnerability or malware from being able to get access and exploit data on your network. Another benefit is that you can force your users to update their Mac OS. You might be thinking, really, this is good. We all have users that will never restart their computer, or they figure out how to defeat the update policy, or their disk is full, and so the update can't even install in the first place. So then we try to contact them, and they just ignore us and never want to update their computers. Well, the good news about this is if you set a minimum OS level, when they get up in the morning and they try to log in and read their email and they try to connect to VPN and they can't do any of that because their computer's not trusted, they will be highly motivated to get their computer up to date. Trusted devices can prevent somebody from also going home and using an untrusted computer that maybe has an old unpatched operating system or has malware on it that could exfiltrate data out accidentally, or, if they're doing it purposefully. This will prevent that kind of thing as well. Let's go to the next slide. So, less typing of passwords. Before we got into this, we were using a different single sign-on solution, and we had to sign in continually. I don't know why it was called single sign-on. It was continual sign-on. But with this, we rarely have to type our passwords. But during the setup, you notice the eventually there, we have to type our password quite a bit just to get it all set up. But once you get it going, it's pretty nice. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to point out that we have scripted our initial setup process, and I have a video I'm going to show you here in just a minute, where during the setup, it forces the user to get registered in Intune, and if they fail to do it properly, it'll just continue looping on the same part over and over until they get there. Since the majority of the users are now external, the only way to connect to VPN is with a trusted computer. So in the middle of setup, we've got to get the computer to a trusted point. So we force them to get the computer encrypted before the video starts. And then once they get encrypted and we get enrolled and registered into Intune, then they can connect to VPN and they can get their bound into AD, get their Wi-Fi certificate that they need to get, and all of that kind of stuff, get the host name set properly. So when we pick this up, you're going to see that the user is prompted to sign in. I have it scripted to automatically kick off the company portal process. You get signed in to the company portal, and you wait just a moment, and it will tell you when it is done. Click the done button, and then it opens up Jamf AAD. So this is where you provide the password for Jamf AAD, and this will ask for access to the Microsoft Organization Access keychain after you get your password typed in. And you're going to want to click Always Allow anytime you get prompted for the Workplace Join key, because it will continue to reuse that key access in the background automatically. So I stopped the whole VPN setup part so nobody had to watch that, but we log in with Chrome afterwards, and you can see I'm not connected to VPN, so I have to type an authentication here. If I was connected to VPN, the Kerberos would provide the authentication for both Chrome and Safari automatically for me. And I have to provide an MFA access because I'm external at this point. So now we scroll down and we get down to the Outlook application, and Chrome has to ask for access to the keychain item as well. So you type in password and click the Always Allow button, and then Chrome will have access. And now this Chrome browser has a token to access stuff, so I can just go open up OneDrive without any further interaction. And all the rest of the apps may be able to open directly, or some might require MFA if it notices I'm external again. We quit Chrome and relaunch it, and because we said Always Allow, it continues to work. So now we're going to try this in Safari just to show you the difference without clicking Always Allow. And here's a pro tip. If you set up your computer with your left finger for authentication, you should use the left finger when trying to actually authenticate. So here we go, and I can't figure out how to scroll the Microsoft Natural or the Apple Natural way, and eventually we get down to Outlook, and it prompts us for the keychain again. This time, if you just type the password and hit return, which I do a lot, you get just the allow button, and it's not in always state, but Safari has a token, so it can open up other apps. Works good. We quit Safari and relaunch Safari, connect back to the My Apps site, and when we try to launch Outlook this time, it's going to ask for the key again because I did not say Always Allow. So every app or browser that you have that can do single sign-on will need its own access to the Workplace Join key. And the good news is with Office and the core set of applications there, once you get one key allowed for the core set, then all the rest of the applications will open up with it. So OneNote, OneDrive, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel all get access to the same token. Teams is not quite there yet, but if you keep up on the Microsoft Slack or on the Slack channel for Microsoft Office, Paul's let it out, or the Teams people have let it out, that it should be working by the end of this calendar year. And I think that's all I've got to say on this slide, so we'll move to the next slide. So that's enough of the flowery world. Let's talk about some of the bad stuff. There's some confusing terminology. There's more things to manage and keep up to date. The users are kind of bad sometimes when it comes to this. And then the consoles and status, and there's some miscellaneous other things I'll complain about. But I'm going to let Bryce talk about this next slide here.
Thanks, Todd. Let me click here next. All right. So, like Todd was saying, the number one thing is to understand that terminology. there's enrollment, and then there's registration. And the best way to think about this is I kind of break it out into this 4-box matrix that I kind of came up with when I was trying to describe it to Todd when we were first talking and coming up with this. And you got to think about it where you enroll directly into Jamf as an MDM. Okay, great. Got your MDM profile, devices managed. Or you could go out and just get company portal one-on-one and enroll into Intune if you have E3 or E5 licensing. Great. That's your MDM then. But the two of them can't talk to each other with that. Additionally, with your Intune direct MDM enrollment, you could apply a conditional access policy, but now the device isn't in Jamf. And yeah, okay, you have access to your conditional access items, but you don't have all your Jamf granular control, and you want to keep it in Jamf as an MDM. So that's where the lower left of this kind of quadrant came in, where we made this partnership with Microsoft to create a way that we could simultaneously be enrolled into Jamf and register with Azure and Intune, now Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So what happens is you're putting down that MDM profile, you're running Jamf AAD, and then that calls the company portal. You do a workplace join registration only. It stops short of that profile, and now Jamf can take that data, fill in the gap for Azure, and we can enforce the conditional access policies then. And back to you, Todd.
All right. Thanks, Bryce. So more things to keep up to date. If you want to put a minimum OS restriction or a maximum OS restriction and keep those fairly tight because the new OS needs to be tested, a new update to the OS needs to be tested because of your security software, for instance, you may want to limit 10.15.2 as your max OS until you know 10.15.3 is good. And you may want to make sure everybody's on 10.15.1 at least at some point. So if you're going to manage things that tightly, you're going to have to update that several times a year. And then you're going to probably want a second group for testing because you need to have a group that can be available to test the newer OSs. Then you're also going to probably need change control to update those compliance policies. Also, your inventory management process probably needs to start including checking the Azure records for a user and deleting old devices. You should also make sure that Intune, all the Intune records or the Microsoft Endpoint Management records are all cleaned up for a device when you've deleted it out of Jamf. If you just move something into unmanaged on Jamf, you still might want to go into Intune and Azure to be able to get those devices out there. And if you're binding to Active Directory, you might want to clean up Active Directory as well, your internal Active Directory. Just one thing to note, the Azure records do not ever get cleaned up automatically when you delete a computer from Jamf. When you delete a computer from Jamf, it should go get the active record out of Intune for you. But if there are multiple entries, it will only clean up the one. So the users. If it wasn't for the users, most of us probably wouldn't have a job. So let's be happy that they're there and talk about the fun things that they do, like forget their password. If you have to reset the password on a File Vault encrypted Mac, you get a new keychain, which means your Microsoft Organization Access cert has disappeared and the Mac is not a trusted device any longer. Or users can see that the Microsoft Organization Access certificate says that it's untrusted and think, I should get rid of that. When they delete it, their device is not trusted any longer. Or a user gets a new computer finally after 4.5, 5 years, and they think, I'm just going to restore all the data from my old computer from this Time Machine disk. When they restore the keychain has the old Microsoft Org Access certificate, and their device is not trusted any longer. Sometimes the service desk technicians can be almost as fun as the users, but man, they do front a lot of calls for us, so God bless them. But they remember back when people have locking accounts and they think, let's see, the last one I fixed, I had to delete the keychain for that user. Instead of going out and trying to clean up entries first in the browsers and in the keychain, they just delete the keychain. As soon as they delete the keychain, the Microsoft Organization Access certificate's gone, and the device is not trusted any longer. So, miscellaneous stuff. There are a list of other things that I like to complain about. Like when you delete a computer record in Intune, it might take up to 10 minutes for it to go away. Or the Intune console doesn't immediately show enrollments, whereas the Azure console does. Firefox does not work with the trusted device solution because they can't access the keychain certificate store. They have their own certificate store. And there are some workarounds. Just tell users it won't work because it's going to be nasty if you ever re-register the device. What's ugly? What was ugly was getting help in the first place back at the beginning of the year and more console issues. So back at the beginning of the year, when they changed the way Intune console worked, I submitted a ticket. When I submitted the ticket through the portal.azure.com like they told me to, it went to free help instead of going to the paid for enterprise help. So that was part of my problem. And then when you get to the level 1 person, the level 1 person's really good at making sure the integration's set up right. But obviously after a year and a half and this new problem of devices not deleting, I didn't feel that it was a problem with the integration. It was more a problem with the Intune console, but they wouldn't ever just go straight there. And then I put in a ticket with Jamf because Microsoft said it's probably Jamf's doing something wrong, and they closed the first ticket. And the Jamf level 1 person, guess what they wanted to do? Look at the integration again. So once you get bouncing through all of that, and it really wasn't that big a deal. It was more cosmetic. I didn't think it was causing any problems. But then late January or sometime in February, I believe, there was actually a few users that only had one entry like they were supposed to. They had everything set up like they were supposed to, but it was... when they went to connect to VPN, it'd tell them their device wasn't enrolled. And so it'd say you need to enroll in Intune. And so that was confusing. And so we started having a problem, and I would put the people into the device trust exclusion group and they'd be able to work. And then I started poking around and I finally figured out why my tickets were stuck at level 1 and they wouldn't escalate them because they were free tickets. And once we got it moved into a enterprise support ticket, and it got escalated to the right people inside of Microsoft, then things got a little bit better. And right about that time, I found the Intune integration channel, and Bryce was talking to other people about the same problem. And we got my Jamf ticket escalated, and then the 2 tickets came together, and we started working on them. And that's when the ugly turned into something much better. So now, knowing what I know, I'm going to try and change slides. If you've got your integration working and it's been working for a while and all of a sudden you get a new problem and something doesn't appear to be right, put in a ticket with both Microsoft and Jamf. And after you submit the ticket, get the ticket escalated. Just tell your level 1 person it needs to be escalated to the Intune people or to the Jamf people, depending on which team you're talking to. And then go collect the logs and have the logs ready for them when they do finally get you escalated. This is some logs that Bryce provided on, and these are also on his MacBuddy site as well. All right, so more ugly. The Intune console doesn't search things the same way that the Azure console searches things. So when you're in Azure, never go to the devices section, go to the user section, search for the user, and then under the user, there's a devices for the user, and it'll show all devices for that user. When you're in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager console and you go to devices, you can search for Todd.NES and it'll show all devices that are assigned to Todd.NES, or use your own username or user that you're working with, obviously. But so there's those problems. That's a much better way to do it. The Intune Devices tab doesn't always show the same number of devices as the Azure tab does. And I'm still seeing problems where when I delete things in Intune, it comes back the next day. I went through just a couple weeks ago, and I cleaned it up and got down to just one entry of every single computer. And the next day when I went back in to do something, the first page showed 3 computers that had duplicate entries again. So, there are some problems that still exist with the console, and it changes very frequently too. So you're going to want to get in and stay on that console fairly regularly so that you can know when to, or how things have changed every time you go to use them. And then on debugging here, this first picture shows a little slice of the Intune console. It shows a slice of the Jamf user inventory console. And then it also shows the keychain. So you can see the Intune device ID or the computer Azure Active Directory ID or the common name for the certificate. All should be the same. If any one of those 3 is different, you need to probably re-register. And then also, Bryce can back me up on this right here, where that red bit of text is, the security settings, I believe, is what makes it say it's not trusted.
Yeah, and what we're looking at there is it's custom trust. So, you're adding your ACL within your certificate for the specific apps, and you're not trusting it system-wide or user-wide. It's whoever is being granted to access it. So it can be confusing, but there is a reasoning why that is.
Right. Thanks, Bryce. So here is some of the other things you can look for. If you don't see workplace join entries in your keychain, that'll be a key that you need to re-register. If the Jamf AAD password item's not in there, then you might need to re-register. Here's an example of where there's one machine that has 6 entries in Intune, which is inconvenient when you're trying to figure out if things are working. And then here you can see where I searched on mine. And on the top half, I searched by my user in the Azure portal side. And you can see there's a 4G 5RP computer that I must have forgot to delete one of the times I rebuilt it out of Azure. And then down on the Intune side, it just shows the 4 devices. And the computer that's up there that's a Windows computer, that comes from our Windows VDI, so it's excluded from device trust, so it doesn't count against our license count and all that. But if you have too many devices showing up in Azure, that can be a problem because it'll keep you from being able to register a new one. We only have 5 devices at my company that we're allowed to have. So the most common solution, the fix for 85 to 95% of the computers that I work on when people are having device trust issues, is very simple. It's these 4 or 5 little steps. I start by removing, if they even have the certificate on their computer, I remove it out of the keychain. Then I go to the endpoint and I go to devices, all devices, endpoint.microsoft.com, go to devices, all devices, and I delete all the entries for that computer that I'm working on, 1 or 3, whatever it is. I'll delete them all. Then I go over to the Azure side and I search by user and I delete any for that same computer that we're looking for. Then I get back on the user's computer and I run those 2 commands, Jamf AAD clean and Jamf AAD register with Intune. After registering with Intune and signing into the Jamf AAD window and providing the key access again, if you go refresh the user's devices, you'll see the device show up, but it'll show up in a not checked state and not evaluated state. And if you wait between 30 and 90 seconds, usually I go fill out the ticket for helping the user while I'm waiting for that. And then when I come back and refresh, it shows the device is trusted and they can get their access to VPN and their email and all that stuff. The rest of the computers that you run across, if that doesn't help, you need to probably unenroll the computer from Jamf. You need to do a Jamf remove framework and then just re-enroll into Jamf, then do the re-register part, and that fixes, the other 9%, 9 to 14%, whatever. And then every now and then I have to do all the clean, get everything removed, reboot the computer, then enroll into Jamf. but it's very rare that that happens. But that's getting closer to what Microsoft shows in their troubleshooting slides. And they want you to go in and delete all the workplace join entries and all the Jamf entries out of the keychain and everything if you get to that far. And sometimes I do. So that's all I have about this right now. I want to thank you for your time. I do need to ask you to please go out and give some feedback in the survey widget. And goodbye.